Good morning and happy Canada Day from the entire team at Halton Food. This next segment of the video is part 2 of my interview with Kerdo from Kayanase, celebrating Canada and our home and native land.
Hello, my name is Kerdo. I am the cultural coordinator for OSTTC Longhouse. I also work in partnership with Kayanase, the ecological restoration company. This is the Kayanase greenhouse where we grow native trees, shrubs, herbaceous plants, and grasses. Okay, so a lot of our stock is dedicated to Trees Ontario, and that's a program where homeowners with a certain amount of acreage are encouraged to plant native species of tree for hedgerows or for reforestation. And so some of our stock is dedicated to Trees Ontario and that important project, which is involves an agreement with the landowner and with Trees Ontario and how the trees will be managed, where the landowner takes responsibility in managing the trees, and it's understood that they'll take care of those trees once they're planted into the ground. Okay, so one of the plants that I like, one of my favorites of our native species, is the square stem monkey flower. Mimulus ringens is the Latin name. And the reason why I like this flower so much is because the flowers are really small, sort of inconspicuous, but one of the benefits of this plant is that it flowers throughout most of the summer season. And it's very attractive to pollinators, such as hummingbirds, butterflies, various types of bees, native bees that we have in our area. And I've observed these directly actually attracting all of those species when it's in flower in our greenhouse here. So this is one of my favorite species to plant, and it's one of my favorite species for restoration because the flowers, like I said, are small and they're sort of inconspicuous. They're nice, pretty little pink flowers here, but they're very attractive, powerful attractants for pollinators to wherever we plant it or wherever we grow it, especially in the greenhouse here. So that's square stem monkey flower, or monkey flower, the common name. Yeah, so on our site here, we're trying to encourage and expand our habitat development on site. And so what we have here are bat boxes or bat roosting boxes. And so the idea here is that because we have a large area we're trying to naturalize here as a meadow, that we're trying to encourage bats to come and to forage here for insects. We also have a pond on site, which is a great location for mosquitoes, which are a major food source for bats. And so with the bat boxes, we're hoping that the bats are using them. Our bats in Ontario are actually in a state of decline because of the white-nosed fungus syndrome, which was introduced sometime in I believe, the late 90s. And since that time has spread through North America, and some of our native overwintering bats, such as the little brown bat, Myotis species, and large brown bat, have been greatly affected, up to a 90% percentage loss. And so we're hoping to encourage some of our native bats to roost here and to provide habitat for them to feed and forage here safely on our site. And so that's why we have the bat boxes. We also have nesting boxes set up in place that are actually being utilized by a variety of species. Yeah, so what we're doing is we're trying to build habitats to attract native pollinators and native insectivores to nest and to roost. So like we have a lot of the native vines growing, including wild grape. Riparian grape are the two common names for that species. It's really important for a lot of moths. So we have around, I believe, 3,500 species of moth in Ontario, as opposed to about 300 species of butterfly. So moths are actually a really, what's the word I'm looking for? The moths are a underappreciated pollinator because they come out nocturnally most of the time, but they have a whole range of host plants that they're adapted to specifically. And it's actually a hobby for people to go out and identify moths at night with different types of black lights that show up the different reflections that the moths produce. and caterpillars. And so another vine species we have here with the 5 leaves is the Virginia creeper. The Virginia creeper is a host to a lot of pollinating butterflies, including Cecropia moths, the very large sphinx moths. Yeah, so they're really important. And if you see a big giant brown or green caterpillar growing on a vine, it's probably a Virginia creeper vine. And they turn into nice, big, beautiful moths. And we also have the black walnut trees that we're standing under now. So black walnut produces a toxin called juglone, but a lot of the native plants are adapted to that type of growing condition. And so the grapes, some of the fruiting plants like the black raspberry are highly adapted to that soil condition. And some of the native trees, such as the sumac, which is more of a shrub, is highly adapted to soils that are high in juglone from the black walnut trees. Okay, so we're now in our interpretive meadow, or our interpretive restoration site. Right now we haven't done much mowing back here. We've actually had a mow ban, and this to encourage the native insects and to actually help the soil to stay moist and to not lose too much moisture, because when you mow, you lose a lot of moisture in the soil. We're trying to encourage the moisture to remain there, remain intact. And bordering a lot of our meadow is Staghorn Sumac. Rus typhina is the Latin name for Staghorn Sumac. So we have the developing fruit head here. It's going to be going into flower probably in a month or so. And it's actually really attractive to pollinators. You'll see it covered in butterflies and bees and all sorts of really interesting pollinating insects that we tend to think of, excuse me, honeybees, things like that. But a lot of the small native bees tend to pollinate, as well as honeybees, pollinate the Staghorn Sumac. So the uses traditionally for Staghorn Sumac are actually the wood itself is very soft, and it was used in friction fire making. So you can gather the dried wood of the sumac and use it to produce a friction fire. It can be used in that way. The leaves traditionally were dried and added to ground up and added to tobacco for smoking and smudging. So that was one use of the leaves. The fruiting heads themselves, these are last year's fruiting heads, so they're sort of spent. These are important fatty food source for migratory birds. So both in the fall and in the spring, when they're returning, the remaining seed heads on the sumacs are actually a food source for things like brown thrasher and blue jays, which I've observed directly feeding on these, and a host of other bird species that rely on this plant. And these are also used to make a beverage. So the seed heads are gathered in late summer when they're nice and bright red, and you actually can take it and mash it into some water. It only requires 1 or 2 of these seed heads in a liter or 2 liters of water, and then the water is strained, and you can add sweetener, sugar, or maple syrup to sweeten it, and it sort of makes a lemonade, pink lemonade flavored drink. And it's really high in vitamin C. It's really high in certain bitter compounds such as tannin, which you don't want too much tannin in your diet. You want to incorporate it in small amounts, because it is good for your gut flora, and it's also helps you to retain a little bit of water, and it helps your urinary tract to function properly. So Staghorn Sumac is a very valuable plant, medicinal plant, traditional plant, and it's also a good habitat. So it provides cover in these thick stands for nesting birds, foraging birds, small mammals like rabbits, larger mammals like deer also will hide out in the thickets here. And in the winter, the rabbits will eat the bark as a food source, and in really hard, lean winters, it's a food source for rabbits. Okay, so the next part of our little site walk here is we're looking at our interpretive garden. So this is more of the OSTTC Longhouse operation here. So we've actually hand dug some beds here. The method we chose was the double dig method. So we dig up soil in the first row, set that soil aside, then we dig up the next row, we put that soil into the first trench. And that's to break up and add oxygen and airspace and to fluff the soil to prepare it for planting. Once the soil is removed, we actually go in with a fork and we'll work the subsoil, open up spaces, and then we use wood chips. Once we have it all backfilled, we use wood chips to lock in some of the moisture and to encourage the microbiology to take hold and to thrive in the soil. And so we haven't done really any weeding here. The weeds are starting to grow. We haven't done any mowing here, not a whole lot. And what we find is that even after prolonged periods of drought, so when we seeded this, we didn't water it. And it didn't rain for about 2 weeks. And with the wood chips laying on top of the soil, it retained a lot of the moisture for those 2 weeks. And with the grass being tall, we see that it's still green and lush, so that tells us that there is still moisture in the soil. And so what we're hoping is that with our small disturbed area, the tall grass will actually lock in some of the moisture, and it'll retain the soil biology that we're trying to encourage in our hand dug gardens here. And so you can see that we do have our three sisters growing here. We actually have squash, corn, and we actually have beans growing in this one spot here. And we sort of replicated that. We also have traditional tobacco and sunflowers planted here as well. And so, so far it's successful, and we're keeping our followers updated on our garden, on how successful or failures that we encounter along the way. And what we were trying to do is encourage people to plant their own gardens, and if they don't have a tiller or equipment, they don't have to worry. All they need really is a shovel to dig their own garden, especially if they had kids or children sitting around, young people sitting around with not much to do during the lockdown. They could take a shovel and dig a garden bed for their family. And so we demonstrated that via live stream on our Facebook page. And so this is the result. We actually have some of our crop coming in nicely.